For the first ES6 video, we're going to talk about variable declarations and destructuring. For variable declarations, we used to use the term var. var should no longer be used in ES6. Because variable hoisting occurs with var, it's kind of got a strange behavior associated with it. Most people didn't actually know that it happened. So if I declare a variable I in a for loop, I still actually have access to that variable reference outside the for loop, which is kind of an unintended consequence. So enter let. We now have the keyword let, which behaves as you would expect var to behave. This is actually used for immutable variables. Const is short for constant, and these are immutable variables. These are not intended to have its value changed or its reference changed. You can declare an object as a const, yet still modify its properties. This is because you're changing the object's properties and not its reference. So below you see const test object is equal to a new object. We're able to set that property just fine, but if we attempt to change the reference to a new object, we'll get an error. Next, we'll talk about template strings. If you're familiar with this, you know what we're trying to do here. We're trying to concatenate a bunch of variables together in a format that we're going to end up using somewhere in our application. Luckily, template strings have been introduced in ES6. This allows us to use backticks to denote a template string and use those to then interpolate variables into our string. These are JavaScript expressions, so you can use variables as well as other JavaScript expressions like ternary operators within the context of this interpolation. The formatting is also maintained in a template string, so if you add a new line and your IDE indents that new line for looks, those indentations will be compiled into your string. So here you can see the declaration of a variable named test with a string that is a template string that states some string is equal to a variable's value test, and then a new line, another string added on a new line. This is what a template string would look like. It's extremely useful for JavaScript frameworks that inline HTML declarations such as React and Angular. Below is an example. There's now simplified object declaration introduced into ES6 as well. If a variable name matches the name that you want to assign it to on an object, then the key value pair is eliminated. You can use simply a single property that matches both those values. So here you can see some variable is equal to test. On that object, I declare a property called SomeVariable. It takes the value of some variable and assigns it onto the property SomeVariable on that object reference. It produces an object that looks like this. For ES5, you can see that it's just a simple key value pair. Next, we'll talk about object destructuring. Object destructuring is taking an object and breaking down its properties and assigning them to variables. Here you can see me breaking down an object with a property on it called toAssignTo and assigning the value of that onto a variable called toAssignTo. These name value pairs need to match up, but you can see in a later example that they don't necessarily have to. Here I'm deconstructing the object with the properties value A, B, and C all set on it, and I'm destructuring value A, B, and D, as in Dan. If I were to output the results of that, value A and B would be defined as it found the property on that object, but D is considered undefined as that property did not exist on the object. You can also use destructuring on object references such as parameters and other pre-assigned variables. The transpiled equivalent of this is to simply break it down into a series of lines and say that the variable value A is equal to the object reference at value A, and so on and so forth. You can use this destructuring notation in parameters as well. So if you have a function that is going to take a certain aspect of an object and you know that property is going to be on that object every time, you can simply destructure it and use the property name as your variable name. So here I have a person with the name, occupation, and Twitter handle, but all I really care about is the capitalized name. So I destructure that object and assign name as a parameter and then return the uppercase response. If you were to transpile the function into ES5, what it would do is it would give it that first parameter a name and then access that .name property on that object. You can also destructure an iterable object. I say iterable object because an array is a subset of those. We introduce things such as maps and sets into ES6 as well as the arguments array, which is array-like. So here I'm deconstructing an array containing the elements 1, 2, and 3 and assigning them onto the first, second, and third constants. If I were to output that, I would get the values 1, 2, and 3 assigned to those three variables. You can also skip over assignments in an array by putting 2 commas in a row or omitting the first variable name in the destructuring statement. You also don't have to match the length of the array. So here I'm outputting every other argument with first, second, third, fourth, and fifth as parameters and skipping over first and third and also fifth. So I'm destructuring the argument's iterable object as B and D, and I'm able to output those values. Next, we're going to talk about the spread operator. The basic syntax of a spread operator is to do the triple dots, aka an ellipsis. So what this will do is it will take the elements of each array and actually split them out. So if I were to take first 5 and next 5 and spread those two arrays into a new array called all 10, it would actually be an array of 10 elements from 1 to 10. You can use this alongside other things such as the push operation on an array. So if I had a blank array and I wanted to copy a new array onto that array, basically creating an exact copy but different reference, I can use .push, which takes in an unlimited number of arguments, and I can actually spread the 2copy collection and basically call push with 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, the elements of 2copy. And that will push those onto the blank array. Next, we have rest parameters, which is the opposite of the spread, but the same syntax. So it will condense the remainder of a collection into a single variable. The basic syntax, again, is the same with the ellipsis. Here, you see multiply by taking in 2 parameters, the multiplier and then the values. The values is a collection of all the arguments after the first one. So you can see in this function what I'm doing is multiplying each of the values by the multiplier. I'm accessing that collection as an array. There is a better way of writing this function, which is using the map function, but we'll be covering that in a later video. Hopefully this is a nice introduction into ES6, and you'll be seeing me use these throughout the rest of these videos. So I just wanted to let you be familiar with these notations, and as always, feel free to contact me via LinkedIn or Twitter. Comment down below, like the video, subscribe, you know the whole deal. I hope you come back for the next video, and I will see you then.